Hi, welcome to Native Report. I'm Stacey Thunder. Ethnographer Edward Curtis is best known for his portrait photography of Native peoples during the early 20th century. He also cataloged their daily life during a time of great change. An exhibit of Curtis's iconic prints, reproduced from the original glass plate negatives by collector Christopher Cardozo, convey the beauty, heart, and spirit of his work. Patrons of the Hennepin County Library in downtown Minneapolis had the opportunity to view Beauty, Heart, and Spirit, the sacred legacy of Edward S. Curtis and the North American Indian, an exhibit of acclaimed and stunning portraits.
The idea of the exhibit is really to honor and celebrate the sacred legacy, the beauty, heart, and spirit that was created by Edward Curtis and his Native collaborators and co-creators 100 years ago. And it is this wonderful record, which most people only know through the photographs, which of course we're seeing here. But Curtis also created 10,000 wax cylinder recordings of language and music, thousands of pages of anthropological text. He did the first film footage ever done on Native Americans and the first feature film ever created on Native Americans, as well as 40 to 50,000 negatives. So we are seeing a highly selected group of his images. This exhibit and other forms has gone to every continent but Antarctica, 40 countries, over 100 venues, and ironically, we'd never brought it back here. So we are now thrilled to be bringing this back here. And in Minneapolis, we're thrilled because it's our hometown. We're able to include things in the exhibition that we would never travel.
Cardozo discovered Curtis's work after a friend noticed similarities in Cardozo's own sepia-toned photographs of Native people in a remote Mexican village.
Just after I graduated from the University of Minnesota in photography and film, a professor of mine asked me to go to a remote town in southern Mexico to help him work on a film that he was going to do. And long story cut short, get down to the town, and the professor says, "Oh gee, Chris, I should have written you. I decided not to make the film." So it was the best thing that ever happened to me because, again, through a variety of coincidences, I ended up in a tiny Indian village. 200 people in the village and a few hundred people scattered around it. So I ended up spending 6 months there and did over 10,000 photographs and film footage and some sound recordings. And it was an incredible, extraordinary experience, the likes of which I have never had again.
Within days of learning who Curtis was, Cardozo bought his first print and has been collecting ever since. He's become known as the world's leading authority on Curtis's life and work.
Yes, this is a wonderful self-portrait of him in 1899 when he was 31 years old. And unfortunately, there was no color photography at the time. So even in this self-portrait, you get that sense of lighting and composition that were so critical to all his work at this period and in the future. He created a record with his Native American participants that is unequaled anything we've ever seen in the world. He was lucky enough to have Teddy Roosevelt, who is then president, become his great champion, and that led him to an introduction to J.P. Morgan, the wealthiest man in the world, who became his lead patron. And Curtis had a vision, and there's a wonderful quote by Curtis, "It's such a big dream, I can't see it all." And this was this idea at the beginning of a 30-year project that he wanted to create a record for us of who these people had been in the 1700s and the 1600s before significant contact with Europeans, how they had really lived.
In 1899, Curtis joined the Harriman, Alaska expedition. And in 1900, he traveled to the Southwest, where he photographed the Hopi and Navajo peoples.
He never looked back. That became his life, and he indeed lost everything. He lost his family, all his money, his health, everything went for this project. But he knew that if he didn't do this, if he didn't make the sound recordings, the film, the photographs, the anthropological text, we would not know who these people were. We would not know what their culture was. And He, I think, was absolutely right. We know things, and perhaps as importantly, we see things and feel things through the photographs that we otherwise never would have. From the very beginning, there's been controversy about Curtis's work. Initially, there were many noted scientists who were really jealous that Curtis was getting all this money and J.P. Morgan was funding him and Teddy Roosevelt loved him. And he had to go in front of a committee at the Smithsonian, a very unfriendly committee, to justify his work, and he passed with flying colors. So the first thing we need to do is realize that Curtis created different bodies of work, and his sound recordings, his film work, and the written work are all impeccable. They are first-class anthropological work, ethnographic work. His photographs, to me, when people criticize him saying that they're too romantic or that he staged or posed things, is both missing the point and is very unfair. Curtis himself clearly stated what he was trying to do with the photographs was to give us an idea of who these people really were in their essence, who they were before significant contact with outsiders. Curtis was a technical genius. He not only was very gifted artistically and had a very clear aesthetic that he followed throughout his entire 30-year career, but he was a gifted photographic technician, and he printed in at least 6 different photographic processes. Curtis worked in, and we have recreated his work in platinum prints, silver prints, gum bichromate prints, gold tone prints. We do a contemporary print process. We also incorporate some vintage photogravures in the collection. So it's an incredible body of work, and Curtis's original work is our template. That is our starting point.
So tell us about the gold tones.
Well, gold tone is a process that Curtis really pioneered. We don't think he invented it, but he pioneered and popularized it over 100 years ago. Curtis discovered that he could take a glass plate that would have, in his day, would have been used as a negative and make a print on it. And then he used a mixture of different metal powders that would be a gold color. They were sprayed onto the back of this glass. You then had obviously a clear glass positive. It's extraordinarily beautiful, and it was what Curtis was most known for. They were actually at the time called Curt tones. And Scott Momaday wrote about how moved he was looking at a particular Curtis photograph, and that he felt that he was home for the first time, and it turned out it was actually a photograph of his people. And to me, the fact that here we are today, 105 and 10 years later, looking at images that I have seen people move to tears by on 3 continents, I think speaks to the fact that he knew what he was doing, and he did it the right way.